Mr. Estrada, go ahead, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. It's certainly good to see you all in person for the first time in a long time. I'm here to encourage you to continue on the path forward. We're like 3/4 of the way done towards going into voter districts. And so I think you're doing a good job. But I think we can show some improvement and do better. But listen, I really congratulate you for getting us this far and getting us towards voting districts. Just a little bit of background. At-large voting is a holdover from outdated voting formats that had always or had the adverse impact on disenfranchising communities of color. San Dimas is doing the right thing. I'm looking forward to reviewing all the data sets that your demographer is using. I'd certainly like the opportunity to be able to manipulate the maps exactly the way he did here. So the maps that I got in the mail or the email they weren't very clear, but I'd like to be able to do that. I hope we can do that. I want to acknowledge some of the folks that are here with tonight. The LULAC, who is the League of United Latino Citizens, a 90-year organization, have sent representatives here today. I don't know that they're going to be speaking. I wanted to acknowledge them. Representatives from the Latina Roundtable of the San Gabriel Valley and the Pomona Valley are here tonight as well as from the Labor Council for Latin American Advancement, AFL-CIO. So I want to thank you so much. I want to give a special shout out to my friend Dennis for all of your years of service, Mr. Bertone. Thank you so much. That's all.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Jose Calderon.
Yes, my name is Jose Calderon. I'm the president of the Latino Roundtable. I'm also an emeritus professor in sociology and Chicano Latino studies at Pitzer College. My wife and I, who is here, and my family have lived in San Dimas for 17 years. And I'd just like to relate one little story. It's a little story. That I was involved in. Believe it or not, the LA County supervisors were historically white. Never in the history had they, in a city or a county that had majority minority, had you elected a person of color representative. And in fact, I wrote an article about this in terms of what it took. So MALDEF had to take the county to court because historically what had been used as an argument as to why you couldn't elect a Latino was, well, they don't speak English. Well, they are, a collective people, familiar people, and they're not competitive. Well, they're immigrant, they're undocumented, and they don't vote, and that's why they're not elected. Well, MALDEF took it to court and were able to prove that historically, the white county supervisors had systematically and consciously gerrymandered districts in such a way as to divide the Latino population so that they could never have enough votes to be able to elect anyone. Well, when the courts decided that, what happened is districts developed. And you had for the first time, that's what they used to say, oh, and Latinos don't run. And now you had about 7 who ran. And of course, Gloria Molina was the first woman ever elected. I urge you to look at the pictures here and how many women in San Dimas. I think there's 1. I don't think there's one person of color up there. And the vote, if you look at the voter turnout, was the largest ever in history of Latinos, which proved that theory of why they didn't vote wrong. And so I think we're facing the same situation, not only in this city, but nearby cities, in cities that have a history of being built, the economy built from citrus workers. Although, you know, there are beginning to be books that are coming out, Matt Garcia's book, Juan de Lara's book. There's another book written by one of my students. They're now looking at the history of the citrus workers themselves and how they were systematically, literally excluded from history. Now, I know San Dimas, you know, we really play up the indigenous. Today's Indigenous Day, and I thank you for that. But there's not much here in terms of, and we have a warehouse. I know there's been a whole struggle. We've often played up the companies, but we don't bring out the history of, there's even a little barrio here in San Dimas, little concentration, and you'll find there, I've found, some of the workers, some of the families who were from generations of the original workers. And you know what they told me? An 88-year-old woman told me, they've left out our history. That's what she said. In this city, she told me that. So let me just say a few words. I do want you to relate to that, and I do commend you for steps that you are considering transitioning from at-large to district elections. So I want you to respond tonight what you mean by considering, and also whether there is the possibility that you will not move toward districts, and that may be a reason also why there's a real argument as to what is being proposed by the demographer. Now, I live in a neighborhood. By the way, those 17 years in San Dimas, my wife knows, and Jim's my competition over there. He always leads. I've run in every 5K in San Dimas. I thank you for that. I always place in my age group. My wife says because there's nobody left in my age group, but which is a possibility. But I thank you for that. But anyway, our neighborhood is a suburban community. Our neighborhood is very mixed. The demographics have changed, so that's why it's so important. The 2020 is so important, and I agree with you. I saw the 2010. I was actually part of the 2010, and you can go online on the 2010, and it gives you the figures of ethnic groups, including white, which you didn't even talk about tonight, in every census tract. You can go block by block and literally see the percentages of the ethnic groups. What it also allows you to do is to move it around. Which was a request of how you can move it around and draw your maps based on knowing the tracks block by block. Well, we haven't seen any of that tonight, or even the possibility of being able to do that. Now, I live in a neighborhood surrounded by diversity. Next door, a Latino family lives next to us. Across the street, they just moved, right, Rose? A mixed family. They moved from Monterey Park. Latino and Asian, married couple with children who are Latino and Asian. On the corner is a family from the Middle East. 2 doors down is an African-American family. And the African-American kids and the Latino kids and the white kids play together every day after school. Right next to us is an immigrant family, originally from Mexico. And then just directly that way is a family who gets up in the morning and does exercises. And I know the neighbors, some neighbors don't like it. They do their Chinese exercises. It's an entirely Chinese family. Why I point that out is that San Dimas and these cities have changed dramatically. And there is an enclave of Latino families, as I said, in the southern part of the city, with generations who go back to farm laborers of the citrus industry. I urge the City Council then to take into consideration the changing demographics in this region, to not gerrymander the way those county supervisors did in the past, to make sure that my election is ensured in this, which is very possible, but rather really take into consideration the changing demographics and be ethical, above board, honest, with integrity, and draw maps that may not necessarily result in your election the next time around. So I really want to push for keeping the diversity intact, and I want to urge the City Council then to do everything possible to facilitate the process of involving our diverse communities. Now, you know, I really have a question about how can you have 2 hearings and now a 3rd hearing when it's all about drawing maps and knowing the percentages of the tracts, the census tracts, in order to draw those maps. How can you possibly have citizen input and hearings and an entire process when you haven't even had the damn 2020 census data? This is the first time. And we don't have, like you said, we don't have the ability right now. See, I thought 7 days, and I was looking because we were told, right, David? We were told 7 days before this hearing, we would have these maps online. We'd be able to move them around and maybe start to figure out our own maps so that we could come and really testify on the maps. Well, that's not so. So what are we talking about, hearings and involvement of the public, if we even don't have the data? We haven't even had the 2020 census data. So I do want to ensure tonight, and I did ask you, and he said after tonight they will ensure, and I want to make sure of this, that those maps are going to be online so we can really look at them, so that we have the capacity then to look at what are the demographics, what are the figures, and so that we can do what you're saying you want to do in the next hearing, which is, or it's not going to happen, which is that, hey, we're going to have some alternative maps, the residents are going to have a voice, they're going to be knowledgeable, they're going to be educated, and they can come here and present maps that are based not on 2010, which that's all I had to work with, to tell you the truth, but working on 2020. And maps that, include all the groups, including what wasn't even presented today, what is the white population in the city, and where are they located. We need a specific date of the release of this data tonight so that we can work on these maps and we can come back. It is my understanding that tonight, according to the timeline, that was supposed to happen, but it was supposed to happen in such a way then that I could, rather than talking in generalities here, I could come and really analyze the maps and then begin to present to you what I think should be the maps. Hopefully with the workshop, and I'm hoping the City Council will keep the workshop, that you keep the timelines, and that at the next hearing, we will have a rich hearing, and that we're able to come back with alternative maps, and we can go back and forth in terms of how we might do that. So that is one reason I wanted to be here tonight. It is very difficult, again, to comment on draft maps, which was tonight when we have not had the opportunity to see the maps. or to analyze them. And given the information tonight, I just want to make sure that you follow the timeline, that those maps, that you give us a date, that those maps will be on your website. And we want to know for sure that you're going to have workshops that are really going to give the community the tools to be able to develop their own maps. That's what it's supposed to be. So I'll be there. It's on my calendar. And I want to make sure that happens. And I want to make sure that that hearing on October 26th can include draft maps from residents, and whether additional maps will be considered then on October 26th and November 9th, and that you will allow for that. I do want to request as much as possible from the demographers. If you look at the 2010, you just go in there and you can move the maps around. You can manipulate, and you know the percentages by every tract, every census tract, every block. Now that's a kind of map. I hope that the City Council will fight for in order to make this as democratic as possible. I know it's something I will fight for, so that we can come up with a map that truly will move this city forward in terms of what has happened in the region. And I'm talking about Laverne, Glendora, all the way down in terms of these demographic changes. And hopefully you all will be ethical and place integrity in the forefront in ensuring that there is no gerrymandering like the kind of gerrymandering that I put forward in the past, and that we allow now for the fullest of participation so that we can advance a diverse, a multiracial, multi-ethnic, cultural community that really not only involves the residents, but allows them to participate, but draws out the best of their capacities and their abilities to create a community that we all desire to live in and that we all want to live in. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
The next speaker is James Sanbrano.
Good evening, City Council members and Mr. Mayor. First of all, as an attorney, I have to take issue with some things that were said earlier. As you recall, your demographer, when he put up on this on the screen, main points from the Federal Voting Rights Act and the California Voting Rights Act. Number one, under the Voting Rights Act of California, was that it is to encourage cities to go and counties to go from at-large to district voting. So the argument that it does not apply to, it only applies to redistricting and not to initial districting for at-large cities is a specious argument. No case law or the statute does not make any distinction between redistricting and initial districting. In fact, the subchapter of the Voting Rights, or the Fair Map Act of the Voting Rights Act, comes under the heading of reapportionment, so that includes everything. And also just the fact that the city has at-large voting at this point, that is a district. The district is the city boundaries. So by dividing it into 4 districts, that comes under the definition of redistricting. So I just wanted to make that point. I also wanted to address the issue of people that are not computer literate or have skills. People have been trying to draw maps since we started this process in August. So you have maybe hundreds of people out there that have been drawing maps, and now they're basically invalid because they don't have the 2020 census data. So I think it would behoove the city to put out the word to those people that any maps drawn up to this point are invalid until they can get that latest data. And as far as the timeline, I noticed that the timeline said that on November 29th there will be another hearing if necessary. So I think based upon the fact that people have been without the data that they're required to have would make it incumbent that it is necessary, and that would be a remedy to not having the data up to this point. So I would urge the city to do that. And I do applaud the city for admitting that they did not have the 2020 census data and that you are making a good faith effort to try to deal with that equitably. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mayor, those are all the speaker cards that have been turned in.
Okay. Is there anyone else who'd like to address the council concerning this matter? Okay, ma'am?
Hi, I'm Rose Calderon. My husband said we've only lived here for 17 years, but it's been 26 years. I don't know what happened to him, but it's been 26 years. We love San Dimas. I feel very safe here. I'm happy to be here. But I do, comments have been made tonight by both the City Council and I believe one other person in the audience about sorry, I didn't want to touch this, but I guess I'm going to touch it. About the diversity of your neighborhoods. And yes, we have a lot of diversity, but when we look at the City Council, we don't have diversity. We haven't had diversity in this city. At times I feel like I am a second-class citizen here because I don't see people who look like me up there. I did know the one female. I worked with her. She was a Superior Court employee as well as I was. So I knew her. But that's as close as I got to feeling that I was being represented here in this community. I am a little disappointed about tonight that the data wasn't available to us in the community. I know we have been talking about this map and waiting for the data, the 2020 data, so we can start looking at what's fair, how we can be included. And mind you, I do feel concerned that maybe we are not going to be looked at fairly, because I'm looking at who has been representing us. Not you as personally. I'm just looking at you as you don't look like me. There's not a person who looks like me. There's not a female here that I could go and talk to who I could feel comfortable raising concerns that I have. So this redistricting is really important to me, and I would love to see someone of color, someone who doesn't represent, well, I shouldn't say that, someone who represents who I am and who my community that I live in is. Thank you.
Thank you.